What is going on, my fellow nerds? OperatorOtter here. Face reveal. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the 5 biggest wins and the 5 biggest points of feedback that we can give Blizzard based on the PTR testing that we have done over this last week. And there are a lot of things to talk about, but we want to narrow it down to the 5 biggest things of each topic that we're going to be discussing. And it's not going to be class specific. It's going to be pretty generalized in terms of what we're talking about. There will be Necromancer videos that will be coming in the future. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to do this rack style where we talk about the wins and we talk about the things that can hopefully be improved. But before we get into that, I'd like to discuss something with you real quick.
Hold on, let me turn on GearUP Booster.
GearUP.
It's called GearUP.
I'm gonna be telling you guys about GearUP.
This company called GearUP.
I use this app called GearUP.
GearUP Booster.
Oh my goodness, yikes. All right, no cap. If I'm going to be honest, if I see something like this in the video, I'm auto-skipping and moving on with my life. But they did reach out to me and I decided to try it out, and the results actually surprised me. So if you're not tracking how ping works beyond your current service provider, essentially there are multiple servers that you can connect to that are prioritized based on the current load that other servers are experiencing. And what this means is that you can be connected on one server on the other side of the country and then bounce back to Blizzard's server back on the other side of the country. And this can increase your ping by about 50 milliseconds and cause a lot of stability performance issues. What GearUP does is it connects straight to the closest server located next to Blizzard, and therefore your ping can drop rather substantially and your performance stability improves. Case in point, without GearUP on, my ping in this Helltide is about 123. So I just shut down my game, I turned GearUP Booster on, relog, and now my ping is 80, which is an improvement of nearly 50 ping. And mind you, I live right next door to the Blizzard servers. 50 ping may not sound like a lot, but I promise you in a game like Diablo, where the CC effects and the one-shot mechanics of these bosses can come out, it's literally the difference between life and death. I ran it for about 2 hours before the PTR shut down, and it's been the smoothest ride I've had since the PTR dropped, so I'm definitely going to be running this for Season 4 when the servers are really unstable. Now, for console players, don't worry. They also have a game router HyperRev that does the exact same thing and will make your Diablo experience much smoother. The link will be in the description below. Give them a try, see how much your ping and stability improves, and enjoy the game without stutters or rubber banding. All right, let's get back to the content. All right, so let's start with the 5 biggest wins because we want to start on a positive, right? So I think that unanimously the greatest change that's coming into Season 4 is the codex change. The fact that we can now salvage a piece of gear and it stays in our codex forever and we can input it into as many pieces of gear as we want is absolutely the biggest change because it's going to save us about 3 stashes worth of space. And on top of that, it's going to be really cool that there may be an aspect that you weren't even looking for, and then down the line you decide you want to switch a build and you need that aspect, but you haven't been looking for it, so you didn't save it. Well, you check your codex, guess what? You accidentally actually salvaged one when you were salvaging your gear. That's pretty cool. So I think that's going to be definitely the most well-received change that's going into Season 4. Next, I think the trade system is going to be very unanimously agreed upon as a very good step in the right direction, where we can now trade legendaries and uniques. This is really awesome for leveling because you can play with your buddies, and let's say there's an aspect that you're looking for, but you can't find it, and your buddy does actually find 2 of them. He can now give you 1 of the legendary so that you can put it into your codex, and now you can actually use that forever. As well with the uniques, it's the same thing. Let's say that you're looking for a lidless, you can't get one, your buddy finds 2 lidless, he can give you 1 of them. So this is going to be really good for just leveling and the actual game experience as a whole. It's also going to be great for the economy because how many times have you found a legendary that has really good rolls on it, but you can't trade it to your friend? Well, now there's going to be a lot more god rolls in the actual trading channel, and that's going to be really good for the economy of the game as well as with the uniques and the greater affix rolls. So this is a very good change. The next one is going to be Helltides. Other than just the fun factor, let's talk about that for a second. The Helltides are just fun now. There's so much more density. There's so many more things to do. It feels like a community event, especially with the Blood Maiden event. There's so much more materials that you get. It's much more interactive. It's just an actually pretty fun activity. And not only that, it's going to be great for leveling because what happened was that when you started leveling in Diablo 4 right at the beginning of a season, if you decide to do it with a group, the problem was that if you decide to do that, the HP of the mobs would increase by like 300 to 400%, and that meant that you can no longer one-shot things, and you actually leveled up slower than someone who is playing solo, which doesn't make sense. You should be able to level up faster if you're playing with your friends. That makes sense, you know, group effort, teamwork, right? Well, in Helltides, that's an open world event, which means that the monsters are not going to scale with how many people are in the party, which means you can all basically focus on a single elite and you get that 4 times damage on them and you can actually level up really fast. So Helltides is definitely a huge step in the right direction. I'm very happy with where they're taking that. The next is going to be the town vendor locations. Everything's just in a nice confined spot now. I don't have to travel a half a mile between vendors in order to do whatever I want with my gear. It's all in a nice confined spot, and that's a very big plus. There's also a jeweler added to the Tree of Whispers, so big plus on that one. And lastly, there's just a higher variety of endgame activities. It used to be only Uber Duriel and T100 Nightmare Dungeons and with the Uber Lilith, And they've added the pits and now the tormented bosses. And tormented bosses, unless you have a completely decked out endgame build, have an range mechanic, a lot of health, and do a lot of damage. So they're actually a pretty challenging activity at the beginning of a season, and I think that's going to be really good for the game and the longevity via the health of the game. So that's the big wins that we can talk about. Now let's talk about the biggest points of feedback. So I think that the number one biggest issue going into Season 4 is going to be the Veiled Crystal Angel Breath bottleneck. What's happening with Veiled Crystal is that it takes 75 Veiled Crystal to import a aspect, just simply because of the way that they changed the codex. They're trying to balance it out that way. Well, the issue with that is that if you're starting the game and you find an aspect that's really good and you want to put it into your gear, usually around 20-25 when you do a dungeon to get that aspect, you need 75 Veil Crystals to import it. You're probably not going to have 75 Veil Crystals. So it's going to take a little while to actually get the aspects into your gear, which can feel pretty bad. But moving into the late game, the problem is the masterworking. Because what happens here is that it costs Veiled Crystals per attempt, and this is really the big bottleneck here, because this is the level of the masterwork. This is the chance to succeed. These are based on like how many average attempts it takes. This is the Veiled Crystals per attempt, and this is this amount times this amount. And essentially what happens is just flat out, without any like re-rolling to the masterwork or resetting, it takes about 200 to 250 Veiled Crystals to do this. The thing is that you're obviously going to want to double stack one specific roll, and you have a 20% chance that you're going to have one of the rolls, and then you have to get another 20% chance to roll another one. And so on average, it's about 5,500 Veiled Crystals. It can be 8,000, it can be 1,000, you could get it first try. But over statistical variance with, average, it's going to toss about 5,500, and that's a lot. That's about 12 hours worth of Team 100 Nightmare dungeon farming, which is not good. Another problem is the Angel Breath problem. It takes about 240 Angel Breath to roll a single affix that you want at 90% of its value. So if you want like 15% attack speed and you want to get a roll that's at least 13 or 14%, it's going to take about 40 rerolls to get that. The problem is that you only get about 80 Angel Breath per Helltide, which takes about 3 hours worth of Helltides to get that 240 Angel Breath. And you're going to have a lot of gear. I'm going to say that through the season, you're probably going to find 24 pieces of gear that you're going to want to perform this on. And that's going to be 72 hours of Helltide. And considering the average player plays about 12 hours a week, and there's 12 weeks in a season, that means that 50% of your time is going to be spent in the Helltide. I don't think that's very healthy for the game, so I'm hoping that they make a change to that. Next is going to be the maximum temper limit. Don't know why we can reset the masterwork, but we can't reset the maximum temper, because nothing feels worse than finding a GG double greater affix roll piece of gear that has the affixes that you want, and then you get the GG roll being at the Oculus, and then you go over to get your temper into it before you do the masterwork, and it just misses on the temper. And now you're like, well, that's a garbage piece of gear now, and you just have to throw it in the trash. I don't think that's good for the game. I don't think it's healthy for the game, so I'm hoping that they put a reset mechanic into the tempers. Next is going to be the class balancing revolved around bugs, not numbers. So since the game's released, it's never been about the actual numbers. It's like, why are you balancing the numbers when really the most busted builds that come out every single season are not based on the fact that their numbers are just too high. It's based on the fact that they're utilizing some type of bug or exploit that's breaking the actual build itself. And so every season this happens, and this PTR really showed that. We have like trillion tick damage from the Hurricane Druid. We have the Ebon Piercer happening with the Necromancer. I'm sure there are many other builds that are involving with these bugs, and I'm hoping that they're able to fix them, but there just needs to be some changes where internally with the company where they need not have this many bugs coming out. Granted, this is a huge amount of changes that are coming out in a very short amount of time, so that's probably why there are so many bugs and probably why they're utilizing us to test them, but I just don't like the reoccurring theme of the most powerful class in the game is not because the numbers need to be adjusted, but because there's some type of bug or exploit that's happening with the coding of the game. It's kind of rough. Next, uniques are kind of meh. Uniques are not really all that great anymore. The problem is that with weapons, you can get 3 affixes of the exact rolls or the exact affixes that you want, and then you can put 2 temper effects, which basically add as a unique intrinsic, and then you can put an aspect in that can buff your build to a lot more percentage damage. And so it's like, what can a unique do? Because uniques can't roll specific affixes, and they only have their intrinsic unique, and they can't temper. So uniques are kind of not really all that great anymore. And so I think there needs to be some work done with the uniques to make them more viable and to make them more powerful in the actual builds when competing with these masterworked pieces of gear. After that, we need to talk about the pit functionality via the density and the HP scaling. So there's just not a lot of density in pits, even at level 200. It feels like a ghost land. You're just hunting elites. That doesn't feel great. Elites give substantially more progress than any of the regular mobs. And so you're really just focusing on killing elites, but there's really no density around. And so it just becomes an elite hunt, and it's not really all that fun. The HP scaling, right now, obviously the pit does a lot of damage, but you can build up towards it. I think they could scale back the damage a little bit. I don't know. We'll see how they feel about that. But the actual HP of the mobs is just not high enough. It is no longer a game of, can I beat the timer in time because my damage isn't high enough? It's don't die, because as long as you don't die, the timer's fake. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right path they want to be taking with that. There could be arguments for it or against it, but I think it should be a fight. I think these things should have a lot of health, do a decent amount of damage, but not one-shotting you, and it actually makes it a fight. And you have to really go through your rotations appropriately and get the damage out. I think that follows the identity and the philosophy of an action RPG more than just one-shot everything or get one shot. I'm not the biggest fan of that. For bonuses that I definitely want to talk about, they just need to remove shrines from endgame content. Maybe this is an elitist point of view, but I'm not a big fan of shrines being an endgame content like T100 Nightmare Dungeons or for like the pits or the gauntlet or anything like that. I think shrines being a part of the endgame content is just a huge miss. They did remove shrine buff duration from the game, so we can't utilize that in gauntlets anymore for the season, which is going to be nice. But regardless, I just don't think that shrines should be part of the endgame content. I think it should be an open world thing that makes it a little more fun, a little bit more entertaining, but I don't think it's healthy for the game in that aspect. And lastly, where are the loadouts? They need to put an armory in this game. I'll leave it at that. All right, so let's talk about some suggestions that we can do to fix the game a little bit. I think with the Veiled Crystal Angelet Breath bottleneck thing, what they can do is they could just make it that you acquire more mats from salvaging gear. Because right now, when you salvage a full 30 yellows, you only get like 10 to 15 Veiled Crystals. Just make it so you get 2 to 3 Veiled Crystals every time you salvage one. You get like 60 to 90 per full inventory. That fixes the bottleneck issue with the Veiled Crystal. I think that would be a much better change. You could also just reduce the cost of the aspect imports, the masterworking, or the rerolls. You could also make it so that the Whispers don't drop gear anymore, and instead they just drop mats. Because right now, the gear that they drop isn't always 920 or 925, which means they're kind of useless in a way, considering everything drops at 925 now. So make it so that Whispers drop mats, like bounties in Diablo 3. For the maximum temper limit, just put a reset mechanic in it, but make it expensive, right? You're not going to want to retemper something unless it's like a GG piece of gear anyways. So just make it really expensive. You want this GG piece of gear? Yeah, it's going to cost you a little bit of an arm. Maybe not an arm and leg, but it's going to cost you an arm. So make it like 50 million gold, 250 Veiled Crystals, 50 Angel Breath, 50 souls. I think that's fair. I think that's decent to retemper a piece of gear. I think that's not crazy. For class balancing revolves around the bugs. Fix your game, I guess. Like, I don't know what's going on internally with the company, but like something needs to happen. There needs to be better communication within the bureaucratic system of the coders and what's going on with the actual game, because there just seems to be a lot of bugs and people aren't really tracking on it. So either have better testers, have a better bureaucratic system, or just spend more time on the game, because the amount of bugs that happened in this PTR was a little outrageous. For the uniques, buff some of the intrinsic unique effects, like Death Speakers and Visage for Necromancers. I don't know much about the other classes, but I know that like Black River and X-Falls do a lot of damage, and the new Ebon Piercer do a lot of damage, but Death Speakers and Visage don't really do anything. The Mini Novas and the Echoes from the Bone Spirit are just not really doing any damage, so why don't you bump them up a little bit to bring them in line with the other uniques. You could also just buff the affect stats of the unique, right? If you can't reroll them, just make it so that they're able to compete. Like, okay, you can't have 20% attack speed, but you can have an extra 100 intelligence because the unique gives intelligence, and that's something that you can kind of cost away. I think that'd be better for the actual affect stats to be bumped up by, I don't know, 25, 50%. That way there's more of a reason to use them other than just trying to get the exact rolls that you want here. You could also just allow a tempering effect, like just one, into the unique. That will give it a little bit more flavor rather than just its single intrinsic. For the pit functionality, just increase the density and increase the HP of the mobs. That'll make it more of a fight. That'll make it more of an action RPG octane feel. And then for the one-hit mechanics, the non-telegraphed echo mechanics should not one-shot you. I don't like this whole, I can see the Lilith spikes and I know when to use a defensive, I know when to move. But then there's other mechanics that like you can't see. There's no warning. They just appear on your screen and you get one-shot by them. I don't think that's healthy for the game at all. I think if there's going to be non-telegraphed echo mechanics, make it so they don't one-shot you. They can do a lot of damage, but they shouldn't one-shot you. And the telegraphed ones, yeah, make them one-shot you, right? There should be skill involved with that. So that's my full thoughts on the PTR. Hope you enjoyed this. If you liked this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe in the comment section below. Make sure to check out that link for GearUP. And then as well, there will be more Necromancer videos and more PTR videos coming in the future. I hope to see you there. Other than that, have a great day. Operator Otter.